Ben, but what do we need right now in this moment? And it is vastly different than what was needed just 3 or 4 years ago. For those that cover sports, they understand that college sports was fundamentally transformed with the 9-0 Supreme Court decision in Alston versus NCAA. Those following history know OU's always been at the vanguard of this, dating back to 1984 in the NCAA versus Oklahoma case. So the key is, how do you make sure you have the skill sets not just to compete in this new era, not just to maintain our historic competitiveness, but can we use this moment to increase dominance, build dynasties, and help shape at the national level what a sustainable model for college athletics can be? And how do you do that? You start by a very loud microphone. You start by stripping away the veneer of the past. And you ask, what are those skills we need right now for an athletic director? And the skill set wouldn't have looked anything like what you'd have said 4 years ago. And a lot of you all know we began looking in different buckets, right? Sort of out of the box thinking. And it was media executives, folks that are in sports, professional sports, sort of looking across the range. And when the resume came to us that said Roger Denny, the question was, wait a second, this is a deputy AD at Illinois, at a Big Ten school. This doesn't look like it's out of the box. But when Jake Rosenberg and Randall Stephenson brought it to us, you began then to look at those qualifications and requirements that we laid out and matched it against the skills he has. And what you found is he spent 15 years becoming the youngest partner at a national law firm where he was doing sports law, handling representation and athletics at the professional and collegiate level. Before going into Illinois, he had been doing things from that law firm that involved searches for their head football coach, leading searches for their head basketball coach. They've gone on a historic run in both those areas. So the question is, what are those skills that you need? His background's fascinating. A lawyer, tax lawyer, and he can tell you about his path. But the skills that he brings are fascinating. In those 15 years in college, in the legal business, he handled intellectual property rights and licensing, media rights and contracts, NIL-related structures, labor law and collective bargaining, capital markets, including private equity transactions. All of these are familiar to anyone looking at the landscape of college athletics right now. Anybody who'd been in this 4 years ago would have never uttered a lot of those words. And then you combine that with the last 4.5 years, and this is what truly impressed me, at Illinois and what he's done. Those two coaches he brought in, historic run in football right now. He has been the sports administrator for football at Illinois. The college basketball coach he brought in has won 3 of the last 5 Big Ten championships. And so when we talk about, and Randall uses the word, a prototype for the modern athletic director, as you look not at his initial qualifications, but deeply into the skills that he has and the work that he's done, we believe that Roger is the absolute right person at this right moment in college sports for the University of Oklahoma. We're thrilled he's here, and we can't wait to get started. I'll pass it to Randall.
Very good. I'll just talk real briefly about the how we ended up with Roger, because I think it's very descriptive as to the why we ended up selecting Roger. The how was really important because you heard Joe talk about the skill set that we thought we needed. We spent literally 2 months putting together a job description, working it through the Board of Regents, working it through the selection committee, and Joe and myself to make sure we were really crisp and really well defined on what it was we were looking for. And that job description's online. You can always go out and look at it. But as you stepped back and looked at that, you said this is a very different kind of individual that we're looking to come in and fulfill this role. And so therefore we said we probably need to take a very different approach on how we go about finding this individual. We did go pick a non-traditional search firm to help do this, Jake Rosenberg and TAG. They were pretty new at this, but Jake had a lot of different kind of contacts in the world of professional sports. I had a lot of contacts in the world of media and entertainment and business, and I felt like between the two of us, we put together a very impressive candidate list that we brought before the board, and we ended up landing on this one for all the reasons Joe said. I'm not going to go back through that. But when you just go down through that job description, he filled those job description criteria better than anybody we saw. And what I really liked about it is he had a lot of really great technical background, but more than anything, he had some incredible operating chops. I mean, this guy just flat knows how to operate, and he knows how to build a plan. He knows how to put a plan in front of an organization and how to drive execution through an organization. And so I'm really excited about getting him into this role and me getting a little further out, and looking forward to working with him. So, Roger?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Joe got the who, Randall got the how, the why. You'll hear a lot from me. Spent 15 years training for this job without knowing I was training for it. Loved the practice of law, loved my partners, loved what I was doing, but as you may have heard me saying there, just never felt the fulfillment and satisfaction, no matter how many boxes I checked or what I accomplished. Just always knew college sports was where I wanted to be. And so took a jump 4.5 years ago, and credit to Josh Whitman for giving me the opportunity to do that, and immediately found the purpose that I was looking for in my life. Over the last 4.5 years, I've been able to act with a purpose, and I think that's when you talk about your ability to drive execution. You can't do that unless you're absolutely committed to what you're doing and why you're doing that. And so I think that's the differentiator here. Been asked a few times, why Oklahoma? To me, that's the easiest question I'll get all day. It's Oklahoma. I mentioned up there, there's only one of these, and the more I'm around the people, the more you realize just how unique this place is. You talk a lot and you hear a lot in our business about alignment. That's in every one of these press conferences. That's a word you're going to hear. I would tell you it's not alignment here. It is all-out commitment. It's everyone I've spoken to at this university, around this campus, in this community, more recently in our athletics department, getting to know some of the staff members. They are absolutely committed to this program and the success of this program. And when you hear a university president use the word dynasty, that's when you really get excited, and that's what we're here for.
Okay, thank you, guys. Let's go ahead and get started with questions. We're going to begin here in front with Jenny Carlson, and then Davis Cordova will be next.
Hey, Roger. Jenny Carlson with the Oklahoman. You just hit on this a bit, but when you talked to your boys during the event earlier, you talked about taking risks. You talked about self-doubt. I mean, this is obviously a big job, and the two sitting next to you outlined just the why of that. So why is this risk the right moment for you? And then sort of the how of things. How do you plan to start to address doing this job at a time that there is so much disruption and probably will be within the department as well?
Yeah, Jenny, nice to meet you. We'll look forward to working with you. The real risk was walking away from the practice of law. You know, I did that 4.5 years ago, and doing that and living in that self-doubt. You know, I walked out in July. We had our first football game that year, Labor Day weekend, and that period of time, that 2 months, call it, lived in a lot of self-doubt. I upended my family's life. We had achieved a lot of success. We were, by any measurement, living a good life, and my wife, God bless her, let me chase this thing. And when you upend not just your life but other people's lives, that's a real risk. And I remember walking out onto our football field. We played Nebraska, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the purpose that I had been seeking. It gave me that feeling that I was looking for every day. And so once you've dealt with a risk like that, and you've come through the other side of it, the rest of it kind of feels easy. The risk here is living up to the legacy of this place, and I can get really comfortable with that because of people like this that you're working with. And I see Marcus back there. I've had a good chance to get to know him, and Mackenzie's back here at the campus level. I've gotten to know Holly and Armand really well. The risk isn't all that great when you see the team that you've got around you and know that you're going to have that group to help pull you forward through this thing. So there's some risk, but nothing like what I felt almost 5 years ago, so feel pretty good about it right now.
Okay, we'll go second row, Davis on the aisle, and then Tom Green will be next.
Davis Cordova, Norman Transcript. Randall, I just wanted to ask you personally, when you figured out Roger was the guy for the job, just during the process.
So Jake Rosenberg sent me the bio, the resume on Roger, and I don't want to exaggerate this, but I looked and I saw Deputy AD Illinois. Thanks, Jake. So what else we got? And Jake kept saying, no, give this a look. And so I ended up spending some time just going through the bio and talked to Jake about some conversations he had had. And after going through the bio and his background, I said, man, this checks a lot of boxes. It's not what you tend to see when you look at a deputy AD's resume, the kind of background that he has. And so I said, okay, we ought to have a conversation with him. And so Jake did an interview, and we use a really interesting approach on this search. It's Jake and I started doing this with the GM search when we hired Jim Nagy. And that is, we'd get a list of candidates, and Jake and one of his partners would do some interviews on Zoom and record the interviews. And so he had a recorded interview with some just standard questions.
Never told me it was recorded.
Yeah, the lawyers informed me he wasn't informed. That's probably a problem.
I was
yeah.
going to say, it's fine in Oklahoma. Jenny understands that. Yeah.
So I watched this unauthorized recording, and I thought, wow, man, this guy's got some depth. And so I said we wanted to meet with him. And so we had a group of candidates, 6 candidates that we brought into Dallas, and Joe came and sat through a handful of them that we thought were really top notch. And so he sat through this interview with Roger. It was 3 hours of interview. And Roger is one of these people, you're all going to find this same situation to be true. The more you interact with him, the more you realize the depth and the intelligence and the wisdom and the passion and the conviction of the guy. And what I like most is he and I speak a lot of the same language. He's done deals. He knows how to do deals. He knows contracting inside and out, knows marketing. And we had just a very natural flow and rhythm. And then after about an hour and a half, I told the other guys in the room doing the interviews, I just texted them and said, sit back. And I wanted to see how these 2 guys interacted and watched, 2 lawyer geeks go head to head. And that was really boring, but really good. They were energized by it, okay? No, I'm serious. They had a really good rapport as well. And the reality was, after about a 3-hour meeting, Roger left, and I looked, and I'd taken a bunch of notes on, even if we didn't hire him, stuff I was going to do at OU, okay? And I gained a lot of insight visiting with him. After that interview, it was really clear this guy was going to be a top candidate for the job. And, we put a couple of candidates in front of the board, and this is where we all landed.
Okay, we'll go to left side for a few here. Tom Green next, and then Jesse.
Tom Green, Sinners Illustrated. Roger, President Harroz over there was telling us that during the interview process, he said that, you had the talent, you came off as wise and credible, but he needed to know in sports parlance if you were a dog. He left us with a little bit of a cliffhanger, so I'm just curious, how did you convey that to him or handle that response?
Tom, good to see you. My guess is I probably used some words I can't repeat here. But ultimately, I think the answer is you're not willing to accept anything but going out and winning, and that all-out commitment and just the unwillingness to accept anything but the absolute best. I think when you take that and you match it with a lot of confidence that we're not going to do anything but the best, I feel really, really good about where this program is headed. I haven't shied away at all from conversations about dynasties. I think that's what Oklahoma deserves. And I think that's what we're going to go get. And so I think more than anything, it's the unwillingness to offer any conditions to success. We are absolutely here to build dynasties, and I'm not going to shy away from that.
Okay, next to Tom, we'll go to Jesse, and then we'll go to Joshua. Jesse, go ahead.
Hi, Roger. Jesse Creighton, OU Insider. Roger, obviously with your experience with the football program at Illinois, I just wanted to ask you about Jim Nagy and this front office staff here. Just what has been maybe your perspective on the last few months, what they've assembled, how appealing was maybe that during your decision to come here, and just how do you envision working alongside that front office with the football program?
Yeah, Jesse, thanks for that. What I would say is I think they're inspiring a lot of change around the industry, which is exactly what Oklahoma should do. Our front office at Illinois is not a heck of a lot different, though. We have, over the last couple of years, built a structure that's similar, if not by a different name. And so what you see at Illinois is a college recruiting group and a high school recruiting group and a separate evaluation group, and we've gone to great lengths to separate evaluation and recruiting from coaching to allow our coaches to do what they do best and really flourish. And we've had similar level of success as what you guys have experienced here. And so it's a slightly different model than what I'm accustomed to, but ultimately the principles behind it are very similar to what Coach Bielema has been building since the day he walked in at Illinois. You know, after Arkansas, he went and worked with Belichick and the Patriots and with the Giants organization. And so he came in having seen the way an NFL front office looks and brought a lot of those principles to us, even though there's slight variations to what are happening here. I think the underlying thoughts between what's going on here and what we built at Illinois are really similar.
Okay, staying on the left, Joshua McDaniel, and then we'll go to Cliff Brunt.
Joshua McDaniel, OU Daily. Roger, this is for you. Could you elaborate on your experience assisting the financing of Bar Park Village in St. Louis? And then what is your current understanding of the University North Park Entertainment District here?
Yeah, Josh. So in that, we represented the bond issuers in that deal, and so work closely with the issuers. And if you know much about the bond market, you know the underwriting process of that is highly complex. The documentation is extraordinary, and ultimately what I saw in that deal, if you know much about Ballpark Village, you know just how long that project took. And the thing I learned from that is you've just got to keep plugging away at it and plugging away at it. And every time it turns and you think the deal might be falling apart or whatever it is, you heard me in there, we'll stay in the fight longer than anyone else. And that's exactly what we had to do in that deal. And so that deal was one of the first projects I ever worked on, and it took almost 7 years, if I recall correctly, before we got it done. And that's what I mean when I talk about staying in the fight. It's not just on the field, it's not how we compete, it's in everything we do. You have to stay in it. And big projects like that aren't easy, and a lot of them fall apart just because of the fatigue that comes with them. And it's the real work that goes into it is keeping the folks engaged so that as that fatigue sets in, no one ever loses sight of all the reasons on the front end we said that was so important. And so I think that's what we'll look to do, and we'll continue to plug away until we get that built.
Okay, right side on the inside aisle, Cliff, and then we'll go to Mason Young.
Yeah, Cliff Brunt, Associated Press. This is for Roger. I read where you said 20 years ago that you'd wanted to be an athletic director. Then you took what would be considered a very unconventional path. Did that dream always stick in the back of your mind? And if so, as you progressed, did you have any idea that the path you were on would somehow get you there?
Cliff, it's a funny story. I see my mom back there. She'll remember this. In 2005, we were living in St. Louis, and I grew up in North Carolina, and North Carolina was in town actually playing Illinois, as coincidence would have it, for the national championship game. And my mom and I are walking into the game, and we see Dick Bedour, who at the time was Carolina's athletic director. And my mom, God bless her, told Dick Bedour in that moment that I was going to have his job someday. That was 20 years ago. I was still in my first year of law school, right? Like, again, God love our parents, right? But yeah, I grew up in and around college campuses, and there's just an energy and a magnetism to these things that's unlike anything else in the world. And so it's always been my goal to be in college athletics in some form. I didn't always know it would be an athletic director, but the closer I got to it, and as I matured a little bit and started to see kind of how my skills could translate, 2021 happened and the world changed in our business. And again, credit to Josh for seeing that the skills I had developed actually translated to what we're doing now. And it took him some convincing to convince me that was the answer. And when he did, you just knew instantly that, once you've checked those boxes on actually doing the work, where this comes into play and what I'm most excited about is you get into leadership, right? And you get to test yourself as a leader. And I think that's what this is now all about.
Okay, first row right side, we'll go to Mason and then Ryan Chapman.
Mason Young, Tulsa World. Hey, Roger. I was just wondering if you could kind of expand a little bit on your involvement with the renovations to the football stadium at Illinois and how that can maybe inform your involvement here with OU already having, a project of that magnitude planned.
Yeah, Mason, great question. So our strategy at Illinois has been a little bit different. For years at Illinois, we waited until that moment where we could come out and do a $200 million project or whatever it may be. And what often happens is when you're waiting for that project, it's hard to invest on an incremental and annual basis. And I think the change, really a change in mindset that we started in 2021, right after I first got there, was we have to improve this stadium every single year. We can't wait for that big project to come about. We have to find new spaces and new ways to up the ante on our fan experience in our stadium. And that can be as boring as renovating, I think, 38 bathrooms. That's what we did in our first year. We flipped all the bathrooms in the stadium. We added hot water. We built infrastructure around the stadium. After that, we started to focus on new fan areas. We've announced at this point a really incredible audio, video, and Wi-Fi connectivity project. And so every step of the way and every year, you're trying to up the ante on the fan experience because everyone around you is doing that. And it's becoming so easy to just sit on your couch and watch it on TV. You have to give people a reason to show up and engage with what you're doing. And that's a all day everything type of deal. That's not something you do every 10 years and close the doors and come back 10 years later and do it again.
Okay, next to Mason, we'll go to Ryan, and then Joe Masato's on deck.
Ryan Chapman, Sooners on the side. This one's for you, Roger. Randall mentioned your ability to plan and build that. So I know this is a possibly big picture. What's your plan to get Oklahoma's men's basketball program back up and firing in the long term? In the short term, what's your philosophy on, you're inheriting a lot of coaches. How do you evaluate everyone on staff and the period of time that you need to make all those evaluations?
Yeah, Ryan. With basketball, one thing we've got to understand, especially as rev share has taken hold, is the sports are diverging a little bit. Football is a lot different than basketball now. The strategies around how you build a winner are different in each sport. It used to be hire a great coach, build great facilities, and once you build it, they will come. That's not the way it works anymore. And so I think from 30,000 feet, what I would tell you is I'm not sure. Each sport and each program deserves a strategy of its own. And so I met Coach Moser this morning for the first time, and so I know nowhere near enough to tell you what we're going to do over there, but I can tell you we're going to dig in, and we're going to sit down with Coach Moser and figure it out. And so that's what we'll do. In terms of evaluating, and I told this to our coaches this morning, I think the key is to have checkpoints throughout the year. You can't just have a postseason evaluation. We've got to sit down at the beginning of the year and understand what our goals are, what our strategy is going to be, how we're going to get there, so that during the year when things start to get sideways, we're not letting emotion drive our decisions. We can go back to that stake we put in the ground and use that to drive our decisions, and then at the end of the year measure our effectiveness against those decisions. And so I think it's just that constant communication of, again, putting a stake in the ground, making decisions in peacetime, so to speak, and then tracking back to that when things start to get a little hairy to make sure we're not acting with emotion, and we're acting with the same strategies that we put in place.
Okay, we'll go to second row, Joe, and then we'll go to James Hale.
Hey, Roger. Joe Masato with the Oklahoman. We saw how much it meant to you to have your former colleagues from Illinois here. And related to that, there's been a lot of talk about you being the prototype of a modern-day AD, having that expertise. But what about like the soft skills, the people skills that are still required of the job, creating a team-like atmosphere within your athletic department, hiring the right personnel, and those sorts of things?
Yeah, Joe, thank you. I think what you saw was a team, right? That's a group of 12 of us that are in it all day, and we care about each other. We talk a lot, the accountability is everything in this business. And what I think most people, if you think about it, the folks that are easiest to hold accountable are the folks you care the most about, right? The easiest hard conversations we all have are generally with our families and our spouses. That's because we care the most about those people. And so that's what drives accountability, is knowing that when we go into those conversations, it's from a place of care and love, and we're willing to hold one another to those expectations. And it's that connectivity and care and closeness that I think you saw when 12 of them showed up here today.
Okay, fourth row, aisle, James, and then we'll go to Brian Brinkley.
James Hale, KC Sports Radio. Randall, it's interesting, the things I've read about you so far. You talked about making any kind of coaching change or anything that you had to do by committee, which is a little bit different than Joe did it, because he was almost a lone wolf on some of his major decisions and how he did things. And Joe, of course, is as good as he can be, Joe Castiglione. So talk about the committee you're talking about, or that way that you go about things, to try to get things done in the future, and how you're going to be able to do that. And President Harroz, are you going to put Randall on the payroll in the future?
I'll let you go first. My answer's pretty quick.
He needs to step into the role, right? And I'm here to support these guys in whatever way they need my help. But right now, we need to position Roger into this role and let him establish himself within the organization. Now, you said Randall when you asked the question, but you meant Roger, right?
Yeah, it'd be foolish to have someone that's led a Fortune 5 company sit on the sidelines and not seek his input. And you guys see the way President Harroz thinks about these things. To approach decisions, especially major decisions, with such hubris that I wouldn't benefit from the input of guys like this, that's not how we're going to operate. I think when you got good people that think and act like these guys do, you have to rely on them to help get you through the hard decisions.
Yeah, and just to be clear, just to amplify that, the way our organization works, when I knew it was Roger, sort of two moments. I talked about one of those, which unfortunately has become the dog reference, which is my own fault. The other one was we were sitting there, and I knew he was smart, and I asked him to do what I ask of every executive that I work with, every leader, which is I need to see on 2 pages or less what is your strategy, what would your goals be, and how do you achieve them, and how do you measure those outcomes? If something's not measurable, and it's easier in athletics in some areas, you're not really managing. And for me, you have to have roles, responsibilities, authority, and accountability. And so, yes, this idea of getting input is critical, but there's, what he brings to me, I understand that when you bring in a professional, like Roger, I'm going to listen, I'll question, I'll receive a recommendation, but you got to know who your professionals are and how to trust them. And so when you look to university-wide, the reason we've had the run we've had over the last 5 to 6 years is because you find top talent, you put them in place, you give them the authority and the accountability together. And when I saw the way he thinks and the structured thinking he has, and then the decisions he's made and the responsibilities he's had and the way he's held himself accountable and the way he holds those he works for accountable, that's when I knew that we had the right leader. The structured way of thinking that includes a discipline of having clear goals and measurable outcomes, And so coach performance, those outcomes, believe me, he'll take input, but he'll make decisions and recommendations in a way that show the kind of leadership that he has. So I feel confident in that. As for Randall, I can't afford him. And so it's 100% true. And he once told me that very clearly when I tried to pay him. What he's doing is invaluable. He's moving now into this role, which is not operating. His role is advisory. It's a governance component that is very different than the operating work he was doing for football. And so what you'll see is that we have the AD. He reports directly to me, and Randall is in a governance role as chair of athletics and a special advisor to the two of us. It's external input that Roger and I know that we need to help structure the best decisions. So when you talk about how do you compete in a new era that we haven't seen before, that had the kind of dramatic change that you heard Randall talk about, someone that knows a thing or two about disruption, I like the word hubris. I think there is hubris behind anyone that thinks they have the singular skill set and that they can see around corners by themselves. And that's why we each clearly have our lanes. But I do think the ability to sit in a room, and I probably had 10 hours of one-on-one or two-on-one conversations with Roger so far. And right now, none of the answers are crystal clear, but together you can work through them with people that can engage in that intellectual exercise that will then help you settle on. One of my favorite conversations was a discussion of one of the hot topics in college athletics, and Randall and I have talked ourselves into the same position. Roger had a different view of it. And the first thing Randall said was, "Isn't that fantastic?" Like, he doesn't agree with us. He has a different perspective on it. Let's talk through that and find out which side that we're on as it relates to this. So I think there is a teamwork component that is different than the question of do you have strong decision-making skills and a clear structure. And I think what we have is hopefully a good formula where there is an ability to bring in ideas, fight over them, churn through them, and then make decisions. And believe me, he's a fully empowered AD.
Okay, let's go to the back left, Brian Brinkley, and then George Stoya.
Brian Brinkley, KFOR-TV. This is for Roger. With this ever-changing landscape of college sports we've seen the last few years, is there something in your mind that's the top priority or the most urgent thing you need to focus on as you start this job?
Yeah, Brian, I think it's no secret. We've got to figure out what the House settlement actually means, and we've got to understand what it means to the industry and what it means at Oklahoma. And so understanding how we're going to navigate this and how we're going to pick our spots in moments like we're in right now where it's not clear how we can be as aggressive as possible and get the resources to our programs to go out and build those dynasties that President Harroz has talked about. That's really the thing we're going to be focused on right now. The stuff that's always mattered will continue to matter. Hiring the right people, building great facilities, supporting our student athletes, all of that matters, but all of that's table stakes right now. It's really navigating our way through this House settlement that really is going to be the most important focus for these next few months, and hopefully not years, but if it needs to be years, it'll be years.
Okay, George, first row here, and then Barry.
Hey, Roger. You guys have all talked about how, this day and age, there needs to be a new version of the athletic director and everything looks different. I'm guessing one thing that's not changing is fundraising and needing for money. I'm wondering, how do you plan to maybe attack that to continue to raise the money to compete for championships? And I'm sure you haven't, dove all the way into all the numbers, but what does that look like right now?
Yeah, George. So one thing, the model here is a little bit different, and so a central fundraising unit is different than what we had at Illinois. Our fundraising unit was within athletics, and so I go back. You guys have heard me use the word partnership over and over. I think it's working with Amy Noah and that team to make sure that everyone understands what our needs are. Those needs are being prioritized. And once we go out and start sharing what those needs are, what we've talked about a lot and what I've experienced around college athletics is we've got to use the right language when we're talking to folks. That gets to Randall's point a little bit. The folks that we're asking to help support our programs are folks that are used to in their day-to-day life having conversations about return on investment. And so if we're going to them and only telling them how much we need and what we're going to use it for, that's not enough. That's not going to be effective at the level we need it to be. And so we now have to go tack on the back end of that, what the return on that investment is going to be. And it's not the same ROI that they get as business owners and executives and whatnot, but it is impact on a community and a university that they care deeply about. And if we can't adequately get them to understand that impact, then we're not going to be able to raise the dollars that we need to. And make no mistake, we're going to need a lot of those dollars as we move forward.
Okay, staying on the right side, Barry.
Yeah, Barry Trammell with the Tulsa World. Roger, you know, people talking about dynasties and everybody's all in on that. However, Indiana's the undefeated national champion. SMU made the playoff last year. Ole Miss is in the semifinals. We still got big names, but the advantages that you once had at an Oklahoma are not here. You don't have the corner that you once had. How do you reach the levels you want to get in a parity-driven age?
Yeah, Barry, I think you're seeing it a little bit, right? It's the hire of Jim Nagy is the first step in that. You used to be able, to some extent, to buy your way to a championship. Now you can't just show up with more resources than everyone else and expect to win. It's all about how you allocate those resources and the decisions you make. And so again, I point to Jim Nagy as the first step in that process. I hope I'm the next step in that process, and we're going to continue to add to our roster of people that really have a strong ability to identify that return on investment so that we can take the resources that we have and allocate them with absolute precision to get the results that we expect.